I always tell folks, if you can have a side hustle while you're doing your 9 to 5, do it. That's the best way, right? Because I think too many people, they try to leave their job to start a business. You need to start a business so you can leave your job. There's a difference there.
You're listening to The People of Work, the podcast that dives into the real stories behind what people do for a living and how work shapes who we are. All right. Hey, everybody. We're back for another episode. And today I have a very special guest, my good friend, Andrew Adeniyi, who is the owner of AAA Solutions. And we're going to talk about that. But as you know, we're here to talk about the people more than we are the work. So I'm super excited to introduce you to Andrew today and take a walk through his journey. So Andrew, thanks for joining me.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. We're talking about your journey, your story into work, and I'm excited to dig in. Let's start from the very beginning, Andrew. So talk to me about when you were younger. What did work look like for you in your household?
In my household, I think the normal chores is really what I associated work with at the time. The dishes, sweeping, mopping the floor, things like that.
Were you getting paid for these?
I was not getting paid. It was unpaid internship that never ended. And Friday night was kind of our go-to night to kind of get the house ready for the weekend and kind of concluding the week. So that's what I recall about work in the household. But then what I heard about work from my parents was kind of a different thing. They were both entrepreneurs growing up. So just heard about the ups and the downs that come with that life. And they felt empowered as well and definitely encouraged us to be entrepreneurs, I would say. But I would say what they shared was a little bit different than maybe my vantage point of work with the chores that we.
So were they talking to you about entrepreneurship or like owning your own company? Or were they talking to you about go to college, get a job? What was that like conversation like?
It was both, actually. Now that I think about it, they definitely glorified the benefits of entrepreneurship. They didn't shield us from the challenges that came with it. We heard a lot of the complaints and the ups and the downs, but the overarching message was always be your own boss, create your own thing, do your own thing. But the pathway to achieving that seemed to always be wrapped under education. So like going to college was never even like optional. There was just like, in fact, getting a master's degree was considered like that's happening. It's just a matter of when and what you're going to study. So education was huge, and they attribute a lot of their success to education, even though they became entrepreneurs after the fact. So it was both. It was both.
It's interesting. It's kind of opposite for me. I grew up in an entrepreneur home as well, but my dad was saying, don't do it. Go, just go get a job somewhere else. This is really hard stuff. In fact, I remember as a young adult, him saying something like he felt like his work was his mistress, which I thought was interesting. I understood that as an adult. Of course, you don't get that as a kid. You just know that work is intense and you're not home a lot. So,
yeah.
But I love that they covered that in education, because I think sometimes entrepreneurship is glorified and it's made to seem like, you know, you graduate high school and immediately you're within 6 months you're a millionaire because you've built some influencer, entrepreneur game online on Instagram, and that's not always a reality. I'm interested in hearing your journey into this. So obviously started with this lots of conversations about education. Do you have your master's degree? Obviously you went to college. Yeah. Okay. So you went to college. Where'd you go to school?
So my master's is from Michigan State. I did it online. It was in management, strategy, and leadership.
And your first job was what? Outside of your unpaid internship doing chores that we all had to
do. Yeah. So my first my dad had an adult home health care kind of nursing home, essentially, through the majority of my upbringing. So my first real job was working with him. I just worked a couple days a week, worked more in the summertime. I think that gave me a foundation of just serving people and being of service.
And what kinds of things were you doing?
So preparing like snacks, delivering the meals to the residents, cleaning tasks, sweeping, mopping, those types of things, organizational things as well, errands that needed ran for the home. Some administrative stuff, but a lot of that is mainly he needed to take care of. So that was my first kind of exposure into work, but I'd say my first legitimate job was probably as an intern when I was at college at Indiana University. I was an intern for an international retailer, district manager for them, district manager internship. And that was my first real taste of work, I would say.
And how long was your internship? And was this your senior year?
So it was a 10-week internship, and I joined the internship going into my sophomore year, which was like unheard of at the time. Most only recruited juniors and seniors. That was one of the reasons why this internship stood out to me. And I was fortunate enough to do that for the following 2 summers as well before I graduated.
Yeah, lucky you. So did you intern every summer through college? I mean, since you started it so young.
Well, the first summer was summer classes. So the other three were the internship.
Did you have, while you were in college, mentors or like teachers that were mentors to you, or people that were either maybe in business talking to you about next steps in your career path?
Not really, outside of just the academic advising support that we got through the school, or some guest teachers or lecturers that would come to the classroom. There's a couple of folks that were influential, but I didn't have one person that I was connecting with regularly who was kind of serving in that mentor capacity. And I think I was fortunate because I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to study business and worked my way to get into the business program. Then from there, it's just a matter of doing well in school and trying to figure out my next opportunity outside of college. But I was fortunate to get that internship so early. So that almost created kind of a pathway for me right out of undergrad. And before I graduated senior year, I already had a job offer from the same company I'd interned with. So I was lucky and fortunate to be in a situation where I kind of knew what I needed to do pretty early on in college, which I know is not super common for folks.
Right. Yeah. You're fortunate to have that conviction so early. Most people, I don't know that they have that, right? What was your major, your undergraduate major?
Entrepreneurship and corporate innovation.
And how did you select that? I mean, as a young person, I think back as when I was very young, you feel like you know it all, right? The world the world truly is your oyster. But making a selection, and particularly if you're focusing on business or something in the arts, I think can be a little challenging. How did you narrow it down? I mean, direction from your parents or something else?
So my dad wanted us to go into the healthcare field. That was kind of the sector that he was in. He was a previous nurse and had done a lot of work there. But I realized I didn't like healthcare. I wasn't a super empathetic type of person. I didn't really have that heart and passion to serve in that way.
I beg to differ. You're extremely empathetic, Andrew, but I hear what you're saying.
I have to work at it. It doesn't
Sure.
come natural. And I notice in that field, it almost needs to be at the forefront. So I gravitated towards business early on. I mean, I remember in high school, my parents giving me lunch money, and I'm thinking, what's the least amount of money I could spend on lunch to save this money, and how can I use this money to make more money? Like that's how my mind was always thinking. So I knew business is what I was gravitating towards. So I initially thought management. It's broad. I like leadership, and I was in a course my sophomore year. I think it was first semester of my sophomore year, and we had a guest lecturer come in. And it was the former dean of the MBA program for the Kelley School of Business. He had left that role to start his own business. So he's speaking to us about entrepreneurship. And he mentioned that the entrepreneurship program at the time was the number one in the country for public universities. Management was good too. It was like top 20. And he was like, how often can you say you graduated from the number one program? So I went to my counselor the next week and I changed my major to entrepreneurship and never looked back. And I knew I was in the right major because I didn't want to return any of my books. Every book was like fascinating. So it felt right. I was interested in it. It wasn't just getting the work done. It's like, no, I really want to know about this stuff.
I feel like you're really lucky to have had that experience in undergrad because I only felt that way in my master's program. When I was an undergrad, I'm like, give these books back, get me through this program. But for me, it felt different when I got into that master's program. It was a subject I was so interested in. And I remember feeling the exact same way. Did you have the same internship with the same company all 3 years? And then in turn offered you a full-time position upon graduation?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So tell me about that. Tell me about your first, corporate full-time paid role.
It's a very unique internship because the internship basically has you working as a district manager. Like you're not just filing papers or working on some random project that's not super related to the day-to-day. Like, no, you're you're shadowing someone, you're actually getting to role play, you're doing it with supervision. You're also working in the cash register, so you're learning what it's like to be on the ground level and interacting with customers. You're shadowing shift managers. There's part of the training where you're shadowing a store manager, and then you're running a store for a short period of time, at least once you get hired on full time. But they created a miniature version of that in the internship as well. So I just felt like I got the real world exposure on retail, people, leading in a corporate environment, but also in a grocery store. And just, it was such invaluable of an experience, I would say. The other thing that really stood out to me was the age. The store managers that I was essentially learning from and leading had been working at the company longer than I've been alive. So here I am as an intern coming in, and I'm supposed to be, giving instruction and delegating things, and they know way more than me. So that helped me a lot with self-awareness, with being mindful of how I'm coming across. It made me very intentional with how I communicate with folks to ensure that I'm not ruffling feathers or challenging their incompetence or character, and really approaching things in a collaborative way. So that experience was huge for me on just leadership, leading without authority. And even if you do have the title, you still got to earn that respect. And I got to practice on how to get just that.
Now, did every district manager at Aldi start as an internship? I mean, it's a really strong way actually to do a pipeline. Or so it was a mixture of college graduates, but also people who have kind of rose through the ranks at Aldi?
Yeah, so their recruitment strategy was hiring district managers out of college, out of undergrad. So it's actually pretty uncommon for a store manager to have made that leap to district manager. That was a cultural thing that I noticed. It just wasn't common. Maybe 1 out of 10 was like a previous store manager. Internships were also rare. They didn't do a ton of them. They were very highly sought after. And, they had limited spots, up to maybe another 1 out of 10 on average, maybe was an intern. Outside of that, it was direct recruitment from college. So that was part of their strategy. And I would say it was a good strategy because to this day, they have one of the best training programs that I've ever heard of. We literally got trained for an entire year. And in that year, you're shadowing multiple district managers, you're in multiple stores, you're doing multiple projects. You're doing, cashier, shift manager, store manager, like I mentioned. Then they actually let you run a store for like 2 months. Hands-on experience. So even though you're young, you may be 23 by the time you get your district of stores, and you got the store manager who's been there for a decade. It's like, well, I've been in your shoes though. I ran a store. It might not have been successful, might have been for a short period of time, but I know what it's like to have to juggle that. And I think that helps with building trust in just a lot of things. So yeah, that was their strategy, hiring directly out of undergrad. And then they had a lot of good things in place. Like they had automatic pay raises the first 4 years. So you're automatically going to get to 6 figures by year 4. So that's part of the recruitment strategy, and that helped with retention as well, because it was a very difficult job.
Yeah, absolutely. I would imagine, and last point on Aldi, but I would imagine that approach has probably shifted since that time, because to only hire 1 out of 10 district managers, you've got tons of store managers. To me, there's like a really clear career path for store managers there if they are invested in and developed, and of course, committed to their own growth. So my guess is, the landscape has changed so much in recruitment that there's such a big push and focus on upskilling now and career development and career pathing. I imagine Aldi's has maybe taken a more balanced approach now with promotion from within, but also kind of bringing in external talent. You need both, right?
Yeah. And I'd hope so.
I hope so too. Well, it worked out great for you, which is wonderful. Let's talk about your next gig. So was it from there that you went to Starbucks?
So it was Kroger, then Starbucks.
And Kroger and then Starbucks. Okay. Talk to me about that journey. And I'm particularly interested about your experience at Starbucks, because I know with the book that you wrote, which I'm sure we'll talk about, you talk about your experience at Starbucks.
Yeah, so Kroger was fascinating to me mainly because I was working for a subsidiary of Kroger called Ruler Foods. And Ruler Foods was almost like a startup, a discount startup. It had been around for a while, but they rebranded, were changing some things, or wanted to be a lot more competitive to places like Aldi. So they really valued me because I had that experience at a high level. So I went there almost with like this notion of, hey, kind of going to have the keys to be very influential in this essentially the startup underneath the Kroger umbrella. So Kroger resources and all that kind of stuff. But we're really redoing everything we're doing as a brand. So that was really cool to be in such an established company, but such a new company at the same time. It was very fascinating. But that allowed me to work on a lot of high level projects and staffing, restructuring projects, and just a lot of HR infrastructure that they needed, leadership development, just pouring into the culture and being able to cast some vision on what type of culture is needed to run this effectively. I got to work on a lot of high level projects like that, which was very valuable. It also made me appreciate Aldi too, because that vantage point, it was like, man, they're really doing some great things, knowing that some other folks are out there trying to replicate that to a certain extent. So that was what my Kroger experience was like. Was with them for a couple of years. Then I went to Starbucks after that, and the Starbucks journey was just a breath of fresh air for me. It was high performing culture, but not high demand, not super high challenge where you're like getting burnt out. It's very empathy driven. It's very, we want you to feel like you belong. It was the first place where I realized that I had corporate baggage I had been carrying with me that was kind of playing a role in how I showed up. That wasn't necessarily how I would choose to show up if I wasn't influenced by some of that corporate baggage. And Starbucks was the first place where I got to first kind of evaluate that and start to take off that armor, take off kind of the shield and kind of that work mask, if you will. And like, who am I outside of, the knowledge I have or the work I've done? Like, who am I truly? And I feel like at Starbucks is when I was able to start to figure that out.
I'd like to hear an example of that. So I think what I hear you saying is like leadership habits that we learn along the way that we think are the way we
Mhm.
should be or the way we should show up as a leader versus your authentic self as a leader. Is that what you're really referring to?
Yeah, and I think, for me coming out of undergrad, I'm still figuring that out in real time. So some of the habits that may get picked up that are cultural norms in an environment may not
Mhm.
actually be a cultural norm that I would have self-selected had I not been in that environment. A couple of examples that come to mind, I remember when I was at Starbucks, I had a leader named Levon, and it was one of our first Monday morning meetings after I joined. And we're going around the horn, just how are you doing? Everyone's kind of sharing that. And they asked Levon, how are you doing? And she was like, I'm not really feeling it today. Like I had a tough weekend and I almost thought about canceling the meeting, to be honest. So, I'm kind of on the struggle bus today. I remember thinking I had never in my corporate experience been on a team meeting where the leader didn't share anything other than something like positive and just have you got pep in their steps and just
Right.
optimistic. And it dawned on me, I was like, there's no way that every single Monday, every leader across the country is in a good mood and everything is great, right? But we put on that face and like, no, we're going to carry on. Like, and what I realized is she was giving people a license to be
Mm.
real. She was allowing you to be human. And the fact that that was a rarity was like, man, it made me just question everything. So that's just one moment. And that led to us being able to show up in the same way. Another one is like just simple stuff. Like I think about psychological safety, right? In my prior life, prior to Starbucks, it's kind of a culture of you don't really bring problems up unless you already have like a pretty good solution in place.
Mhm.
So you're really not even brainstorming things in the early phases because you almost need to have it nailed down to not come across as complaining or not coming across as you haven't done the work to solve the problem. So that's what I just assumed you needed to have. But then I got to Starbucks and it's like, well, no, we want you to feel comfortable sharing half baked ideas and not to create an environment where everyone's just complaining. But we recognize that somebody may have a great solution to what you're talking about. But unless you share that when it's half baked, you miss out on that opportunity for collaboration. You miss out on that opportunity for innovation. And I feel like Starbucks created an environment where I can share how I'm feeling and I don't have to have thought this through 75 times and have a completed plan to present to you by the time we're ready to share.
That's great. They're known for their culture. You share some great examples of that in real time, in real life. So I love that. So grew up in an entrepreneurial home, went to college to study entrepreneurship, landed in corporate.
Yeah.
spent some years in corporate. Talk to me about the transition, or at the time where you really started kind of feeling that tug or that pull. Was it at Starbucks? Was it before that? And talk to me about that transition that you made into entrepreneurship.
The tug has always been there. It was just a
Mhm.
matter of what would I be doing and what could I do that could actually sustain me financially. And I was struggling to kind of pinpoint that. I'd started a business a few years after graduation called Handy Brand, where the idea was to take people who had ideas to start a business and kind of get them set up with business plan and logo and website and that type of thing. I had a business partner that ultimately failed because what we learned is many aspiring entrepreneurs don't have the budget needed for us to be able to sustain a business off of. So learned a lot from that. And then it just became, hey, I really love leadership. I really love culture. My master's degree is in that. So let me start helping like small businesses. And that's what really prompted it. And I was doing that work. But I would say the true catalyst for realizing I need to do consulting and speaking work was realizing that most cultures suck and were substandard, and it was controllable to be able to turn it around. It just came down to being intentional with the intangibles. So through that journey in my professional career, learning that, a master's program, and then the writing of my first book, The Circle of Leadership, that's what gave me the clarity to know, okay, this is what I want to spend my professional career doing forever if I could choose.
So, did you write the book Circle of Leadership while you were at Kroger and Target, or was it after that and you went into you started your own business?
So I wrote the book in the summer of 2020. So at that point, I was transitioning from Kroger to Starbucks when the
Hmm.
book finally came up. And it took me about a year to write the book. So I think I started writing the book towards the tail end of my time with Aldi, or maybe towards the beginning of my time with Kroger, but finally came out when I was actually with Starbucks.
So,
Yeah.
tell me about the actual steps of leaving corporate, leaving Starbucks.
Yeah.
A great career, great culture. You decide to make the leap. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I was fortunate to have a couple clients on a recurring basis while I was working my corporate job. So I always tell folks, if you can have a side hustle while you're doing your 9 to 5, do it. That's the best way, right? Because I think too many people, they try to leave their job to start a business. You need to start a business so you can leave your job. There's a difference there. So that was helpful. I had that and I can kind of see, okay, if I had more time, I might be able to get some more business, et cetera. Then there's a series of events that happened personally, and I'm a person of faith. So I felt like God was just speaking directly to me and was giving me confirmation of when I needed to take the leap. So one of the first things I noticed was I was getting ready to go on paternity leave for with my second child, my daughter, and I was getting burnt out as I was heading towards that paternity leave. My career at Starbucks was growing. I was on path for promotion there, and my business was growing. I was starting to see more interest in my services, and I was like, man, I'm going to have to choose one or the other. I can't keep doing both. So I was fortunate to have that paternity leave. During that leave, I got to kind of disconnect to a certain extent, and
Mhm.
I realized, I think the final thing that kind of confirmed it for me was my brother-in-law's girlfriend was tragically murdered in Chicago randomly, like an hour before her like 26th birthday or something. It was something from a movie, honestly. And I remember thinking, like, when someone passes away, a lot of folks will say life is short. And you have that moment of kind of reflection. They usually go back to how you live normally. And that didn't feel right in that moment. So I remember asking God, like, life is short. So what? Like, what should I be doing differently because of that? And at clear as day, it was just like, you need to chase your dreams. You can't keep pushing this off. So I literally devised a plan to say, you know what, when I come back, I'm going to give 2 months notice. I think I gave 6 to 8 week notice just to make sure I don't burn any bridges. I'm going to go full speed ahead with marketing and kind of getting the business going. Now to ask myself, if I'm able to get this recurring revenue while I'm working, if I woke up every day and dedicated myself to it, could I exceed what I'm making from Starbucks? And very clearly it was yes. So that was kind of my journey. I started to interview a lot of people who had taken that leap to get advice.
Mhm.
People said things like pick a date, make sure you have certain boundaries, or else you're going to miss a lot of your kids' activities and things like that. Even little tidbits like you need business insurance. I'm like, business insurance? I like didn't even cross my mind. So I was able to use that time to kind of start preparing and planning my true exit. And it was August of 2022 when I officially took the lead and started doing the work full time.
So we're coming up on your 3 years of anniversary for AAA Solutions. Talk to me about your business, how it's doing today, and what's the most exciting thing you're working on.
Yeah, business is going well. So, started in February 2020, right before the pandemic. And so did a lot of virtual training, a lot of virtual consulting at that time. Obviously was still working with Starbucks at that
Mhm.
time. And then once I took the lead, it was really just full out, helping leaders primarily with their diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I started it with workplace culture and leadership with the aftermath of the George Floyd murder. DEI was kind of the huge priority. So that was great. Got very connected with a lot of different organizations, got a lot of speaking engagements, and that helped kind of the business thrive and get my word out there. And then, now with the anti-DEI movement, what I'm finding is a need to go back to my roots of, well, this all started from workplace culture. DEI was always a subset of that. It's one chapter within the first book I wrote, The Circle of Leadership. So now I'm kind of going back to how I started, with DEI being a little less prevalent of the work that I do, but I still have many clients that are specifically DEI focused as well. So trying to balance that, I would say, is one of the challenges and opportunities that I'm faced with right now. I would say the most exciting part of the business, there's a couple of things. One, it's seeing some companies continue to push forward. I have some clients where it's like, we're not changing any verbiage. We're not taking anything off the website. We're not doing anything. We weren't doing anything illegal before. We're not doing anything illegal now. Like, we're going to continue business as usual. That has been encouraging to see. I have a lot of clients that have had to pivot as well. So I've seen kind of the full spectrum. But seeing folks still passionate about the work, even if they do need to change what it's called, and finding creative ways to push forward, that's been encouraging to me, because that lets me know that, okay, people weren't just doing it because it was the hot thing to do. They truly want to make a difference.
Well, and your point is such a good one, that you really can't have culture building without DEI. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a piece of belonging that is the fabric of DEI, and it's the fabric of culture, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how you have one without having a focus on both or either, right?
Yeah. We start talking about culture building and making sure people feel seen. We all need different things for that. And that's where the diversity, the inclusion comes in. And we all want a fair work environment. And that's really what equity is. So that's where it's just, sometimes it's just, we're getting into politics rather than true definitions and true meanings. And it's a whole different ball game that I'm not always interested in playing in.
Mhm. That's right. I asked you earlier if you had mentors in college, and we talked a little bit about maybe academic advisors and that sort of thing. What about in your professional life today? Do you have people around you that you consider mentors, coaches, teachers?
Yes, I do. I would say one that I've been probably the closest to as of late has been Britt Griffin. So he does amazing HR and DEI related work across the city, currently the chief people officer for Indigo. And he's been great too, because for me, he's been kind of that HR mentor who has seen it at a lot of different levels, has in-depth knowledge of the different functions throughout HR, and has done it in so many different industries as well, to where he's just a breath of knowledge, calls it as he sees it, and very willing to help. So he's been super helpful on that front. On the consulting front, I'm looking to get some additional mentors there. It's kind of on my to-do list, honestly, folks who have kind of built up their business to a point that I aspire to be. I would say in the earlier stages of my business, I was able to get some really good feedback from Brian Kreiter, who had a marketing company that he started. Also Travis Brown, who had launched Mojo Up Marketing and Media. So they provide some early guidance for sure as well.
So what's next? What's coming up that's exciting that you're working on or you're hoping to work on? Any new books in the works?
Well, there's actually, I need to get a new copy, but my son and I just created a book
Oh, I
called
love
Eli
it.
the Entrepreneur. So this is,
Eli the Entrepreneur. Okay. Tell me about it.
yes. So when I wrote my second book, The Building Blocks of Belonging, my son came to my office one time and was blown away that I wrote a book. He couldn't believe I wrote all of that. He's like, I want to write a book. I was like, sure, you can write a book too. He's like, can we write one together? And I was just like, yeah, sure, son, we can do that. No problem. I didn't think too much of it. And then he followed up like a week later. He's like, Dad, you said we're gonna write a book. I'm like, oh, he really wants to write a book. So I was like, what do you want to write about? And he's like, I want to write about what you do. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you're an entrepreneur. And he butchered the word the first time he said it. And I was like, okay, well,
How old is Eli?
he's 7 now.
He's 7. Okay.
He's 7 now. But we were having this conversation as he was getting ready to turn 6. So yeah, that just led to, we'll call it Eli the entrepreneur, a journey to learning entrepreneurship. So he learns about, we try to incorporate things he's actually doing. So he goes to the barber shop. And I was like, your barber's an entrepreneur. He's like, really? He's blown away. I was like, yeah, this is how it works. So it's just a short book that we wrote it hoping to be the first book a kid would be able to read and understand about entrepreneurship.
That's amazing. So Eli the entrepreneur, is it on Amazon?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
There's your plug. Okay. I can't wait to get it. I love this. That's exciting.
It's my first time mentioning it too on the podcast. So it's kind of
great.
just like a project, but I didn't even think about starting to get the word out. So I'm excited about that. That's done.
That's great.
Another thing I'm excited about is a partnership with an organization called Act Out. And Act Out is a social drama theater organization, and they act out various scenarios. They have primarily been in schools and police departments, fire stations, working on things like bullying or domestic violence or whatever that may be. And they wanted to break into corporate, and that's where I spend my time. So we created a Courageous Conversation series. It's a 4-part series where basically there's 3 scenes for each of the topics, and they'll act out a scene. And as we get to the climax of the scene, I will pause the scene and draw the audience in to start really dissecting what took place, what went well, what could have been done differently. How does this show up in your workplace? And then the actors can resume the scene and do it the right way. So it's very interactive, very engaging. These are excellent actors, mind blowing to see the skill level of these individuals. And we're able to kind of balance entertainment with truly learning some principles that you can easily apply. So the Courageous Conversation series, that's something I'm excited about, as well as Eli the Entrepreneur.
I love that. Those are both so exciting. Is Act Out a nonprofit, and how are you connected?
Yeah, so I think the larger organization is I think it's called McCloud. They do plays and they host a ton of events and things like that. So I think that's their larger umbrella. I think they are considered a nonprofit, if I'm not mistaken. And then Act Out is kind of a subsidiary of the organization, of the production company, where they're specifically going into these different organizations and acting these things out. So I had a friend who was on a board that I also served on who connected me with them, and we kind of co-created this content. So we're talking about, how do you value diverse perspectives? We talk about psychological safety. We talk about holding people accountable while still being empathetic, and really just having courageous conversations, being willing to roll up the sleeves and embrace the discomfort that can come with it.
Absolutely. That's so cool. I love that. I love what you have coming up. That's great. I do want to ask a question about the work you're doing today. And I guess I'm really thinking about this from the angle, if somebody thinks that entrepreneurship is super sexy, which, it is, right? There is an element of that feels sexy for whatever reason. But let's talk about the real hard work, the stuff that's not on the Instagram reel about entrepreneurship. Oh, yeah. If you were going to tell somebody that's looking into heading down that path, what advice would you give them?
Start with why is the first thing. You may have heard of Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why, for the folks listening. I think having clarity in why you're doing what you're doing is so important, because you're going to have tough days. And that why is going to remind you, okay, we've got work to do. Okay, I'm making a difference. For me, 2/3 of people in the workplace are not engaged at work. And knowing that it's controllable for people to feel seen, heard, and valued, it's just a crime to me that so many people on Sunday night are upset. So I've got work to do. And I have to help leaders create better workplaces. So knowing that why on those tough days is literally the difference between firing the laptop back up or disengaging. So start with why. I would say cash flow is another one that was a huge struggle for me. Finding that rhythm of sending invoices, getting payments, hopefully on time. And if you don't have it on time, how are you managing that? Getting a business line of credit to be able to fall back on, but not over leveraging that or credit cards so you're not accumulating too much debt. That was a struggle. I'm not a numbers person. That's not my expertise. That's not where I like to play. And I realized that if you don't have your eye on that enough, that'll literally be the end of your business. So the other thing is going to be strategic partnerships. Like, you can get burnt out so quickly being the chief everything officer. That's really what entrepreneurship ends up being. And what can lighten the load is having partners. You may not have the funds to be able to hire people, but you can leverage freelancers. You can leverage systems that help you automate. And I feel like over the years, I've been fortunate to bump my head a lot to get to the point where I'm like, all right, I need to figure out what to do about these taxes or this business insurance or this or that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been able to find partners that help me with that. So that would be my advice to entrepreneurs. I got a lot more than that, but the first three that come up: cash flow, start with why, and really who you partnered with is critical.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. I think, and that's the reality of entrepreneurship, right? I mean, you have to have some sort of a sales bend or focus because you are selling yourself. You are the product, you are the service, right? So that has to
Yeah.
be an element of your focus really every day as an entrepreneur. Fill in this blank for me. At this point in my life, I defined freedom as,
Peace.
tell me more about that.
I got 7'5", 3-year-old at home, married, mother who's getting ready to move nearby, entrepreneur. I mean, the roles, the responsibilities, the titles that I have are a lot. So when I talk about freedom and autonomy, I most likely have that if I'm experiencing a sense of peace, which for me means self-care, the ability to make decisions, opportunity for solitude, while also an opportunity for community, doing fulfilling work. All of that to me is wrapped up in that sense of peace. So if I feel freedom, then I'm probably feeling at peace.
I love that. Last question for you today, Andrew. What is your switch off? What do you do to decompress? Music, favorite books, guilty pleasure? Talk to me about that.
Oh man. So working out, that's definitely a big part of it for me. Try to work out at least 3 times a week, going in the sauna in particular. I think that's some of the most, talk about peace. That's some peaceful time for me. Also little things like just sitting on the rocking chair in front of my house, watching the sprinklers go off, like the smallest things for me. I'm learning that bring me peace. I think because my household is usually so loud with the kids. So anytime I can just get outside or get somewhere where it's just quiet or listen to music, all those things are super peaceful for me. And then writing, as an entrepreneur, just thoughts are constantly going through my head. And I realized that the way I could switch off is just doing brain dumps, getting it all out of my head. So those are a couple of things that I go to pretty regularly.
That's great. Andrew, thank you so much for your time today. Just so much great advice. And, I love to hear about your journey. It's very insightful. You've got such a great, calm approach and demeanor. I can totally see why your clients love working with you. And I don't know that this work will ever be done around in trying to improve culture, particularly as workplaces change, as we're in more hybrid environments and how we collaborate is just different. It's shifted so much over the last 5 years. I think this work is so important. It'll always be there. And I really look forward to watching and being a part of your journey. So thank you again for your time today.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to The People of Work. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow along and share it with someone who'd love these stories too. Do you or someone you know have a unique job or an inspiring work journey? I'd love to hear about it. You can find me on Instagram at The People of Work or visit thepeopleofwork.com. And if you're navigating a career transition or just need support in your work life, I'm here for that too. From personal coaching to leadership and HR consulting, I'd love to help. Head to thepeopleofwork.com to learn more and get in touch. Until next time, thanks for being a part of The People of Work.